Welcome to Sissy Fantasy World, where every story sparkles. Don't forget to subscribe for more magic. I never expected my life to flip inside out over something as stupid as a bet. It all started on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind where the air feels thick and full of warnings you can't quite name. I was sitting in the school cafeteria, half awake and still annoyed at my best friend, Tyler, for calling me out in front of everyone. He said, loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, that I'd never last a day living like a girl because I was too stiff and too scared of anything outside my comfort zone. His comment stung more than I wanted to admit, so I fired back, said he was full of it, and if the situation came up, I'd handle it better than anyone expected. The tension built so fast that people stopped eating just to watch us argue. Some students actually started filming with their phones, which added fuel to the fire. Before I knew it, the conversation twisted into a challenge. Tyler smirked, arms crossed like he'd already won. He proposed I live as a girl for an entire week, not just wearing clothes but walking the walk, talking the talk, attending school, and staying in public as if this new identity were actually mine. I thought he was joking, but everyone around us began to whisper, leaning closer, waiting for my answer. Backing down would have made me look scared. And besides, I honestly thought it would be easy. I shrugged and agreed, laughing it off like I wasn't nervous, but my heart was pounding. The challenge quickly spiraled far beyond our control. Word spread, turning a simple dare into something much bigger. Even teachers caught wind of it. My older sister, Maya, jumped in immediately and insisted she'd be the one to help transform me, because she didn't trust Tyler not to make me look ridiculous. I hated the idea of being dressed up like some doll, but somehow it felt better with her guiding me instead of him. The rules were officially set. For 7 days straight, I'd present myself as female everywhere I went. No cheating. That night when I got home, the full reality hit me. I sat on my bed staring at my reflection, wondering how I'd gotten myself into this. My room felt strangely quiet, like it knew something I didn't. The thought of walking through school in a totally new identity made my stomach twist, but I kept telling myself it was just a week, not forever. Maya burst into my room before I could get too deep in my thoughts. She carried 2 bags, one stuffed with makeup, the other with clothes she apparently planned to use on me. Her smile was way too excited, like this was an opportunity she'd been waiting for. She told me the plan. We'd start the transformation tomorrow morning so I could debut at school right away. No warm-up, no easing into it. She wanted the full dramatic reveal. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined people laughing, pointing, whispering behind my back. But there was also a strange curiosity bubbling beneath the fear. What would I look like? Would anyone recognize me? A small part of me wanted to know. Morning came too quickly. Maya yanked me out of bed and sat me down at her makeup desk. The process felt endless. Foundation, concealer, powder, and tools I didn't even know existed. It was overwhelming, but she moved with confidence, reassuring me with simple directions so I wouldn't panic. She told me makeup wasn't about hiding, it was about expressing. That idea stuck with me more than I expected. Once she finished my face, she handed me clothes. Soft leggings, a long sweater, and a pair of sneakers that somehow looked cute but weren't uncomfortable. Getting dressed wasn't as awkward as I imagined, but seeing myself in the mirror was. My reflection looked both familiar and different. My features were still mine, but softened, reshaped through subtle details I couldn't explain. I didn't look like a caricature, I looked like a real girl. My thoughts scrambled. I felt exposed, but also strangely composed. Maya asked what I wanted my name to be for the week. I froze. The idea of choosing a new label for myself made everything feel more real. After a moment, I blurted out the first name that came to mind, Arya. She smiled and said it suited me. I wasn't sure whether to take that as a compliment or a warning. Tyler texted me as we prepared to leave. He said he'd be waiting outside school, eager to see if I'd follow through. My heart thumped hard enough to hurt, but there was no turning back. I grabbed my bag, oddly lighter than usual, and followed Maya to the door. The air felt colder, sharper, as if the world was paying extra attention. I had no idea what was coming next, only that I was already in deeper than planned. And despite the fear, something inside me whispered that this might change more than just the next 7 days. The car ride to school felt unreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life and forgotten how to step back out. I sat in the passenger seat trying to relax, but every stoplight felt like a warning. I kept checking my reflection in the window, half expecting the makeup to suddenly melt off or my clothes to somehow announce to the world that I was pretending. But everything stayed in place. I looked convincing, too convincing. Maya kept glancing over at me with a proud, almost protective look. She reminded me to breathe, to stand tall, and not to overthink the way I walked. She said if I looked nervous, people would notice. That sounded like the worst possible advice, because suddenly I was hyper-aware of every muscle in my body. I sat stiffly, determined not to move wrong. As we pulled into the school parking lot, I saw small groups of students trickling inside. Nothing unusual until I remembered that today all eyes would be on me. My chest tightened. What if people immediately saw through me? What if they laughed? Maya noticed my panic and squeezed my hand, telling me I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. But that wasn't true. I'd made the bet. I'd talked big. Now I had to walk in there and survive it. We parked and I stepped out slowly. The cool air brushed against my face, and for a moment I forgot how to move. Maya nudged me forward. The sound of my footsteps, soft and strangely quiet, felt foreign. I kept my gaze low, hopping to blend in, but I knew that wasn't possible. The first real test happened before I even reached the doors. A group of girls from my math class passed by. They looked at me first casually, then with narrowed eyes, searching for familiarity. I braced for a comment, a laugh, a whisper. Instead, one of them gave me a nod and said, "Cute sweater." Just like that. I muttered a thank you, shocked that they didn't recognize me at all. The realization hit hard. I actually looked the part. Inside, everything felt louder. Lockers clanged, shoes squeaked, conversations layered over each other like static. I walked carefully, forcing myself to breathe normally and act natural. The students around me didn't stare as much as I expected. And that made the anxiety shift from fear of exposure to fear of not knowing where I fit. When I reached my locker, Tyler was waiting, leaning against the metal door like he'd rehearsed the pose. His eyes widened as he saw me. He straightened, suddenly unsure. For a moment he just stared, mouth slightly open. Then he burst into a low laugh, not mocking, more surprised. He said he didn't expect me to take the challenge seriously. I wanted to snap back, but I noticed something strange in his expression, respect maybe, or confusion. He asked my new name, and when I said Arya, he nodded like it made perfect sense. He even offered to walk with me to first period, something he'd never done before. It felt odd having him beside me, more attentive than usual. I wondered if he saw me differently now, or if he was just impressed that I'd shown up at all. The first few classes were a blur. Teachers called me by the name Maya added to attendance records. No one questioned it. I spent most of the morning trying to keep my voice calm and my posture relaxed. Surprisingly, it didn't take long to adapt. The more I interacted with people, the easier it became. I still felt like I was performing, but not as frantically as I'd imagined. During lunch, I sat with Maya and a few of her friends. They welcomed me without hesitation, asking innocent questions about my outfit, my hair, and whether I felt nervous. I answered carefully, trying to sound natural. They didn't treat me like a stranger or a joke. They treated me like one of them. It was disorienting, yet comforting. Then something unexpected happened. While I was eating, I caught my reflection in a window. The girl looking back wasn't awkward or tense. She looked composed, maybe even confident. I barely recognized myself, and the realization sent a weird shiver down my spine. I wasn't just pretending anymore. I was starting to settle into this new version of me, a version that felt strangely right in ways I couldn't explain. The afternoon passed without incident until the final bell rang. As I packed my bag, a quiet voice behind me said my name, Arya. I turned and saw a boy I barely knew from English class. He seemed nervous, shifting from foot to foot. He complimented my hair and asked if I wanted to study together later in the week. I froze, unsure how to respond. My brain scrambled for an answer that wouldn't blow my cover. I managed a polite decline, blamming homework. He nodded, cheeks pink, and hurried away. That moment shook me more than anything else that day. Someone had approached me not because they recognized me, but because they saw me as someone new. It was flattering, confusing, and unsettling all at once. When school ended, I walked to the parking lot feeling lighter than I had in the morning. I survived. More than that, I belonged somehow. No pointing, no laughing, no chaos, just curious faces and unexpected acceptance. Maya picked me up, asking 100 questions before I even closed the door. She wanted every detail: who talked to me, how my classes went, whether I felt comfortable. I found myself talking freely, describing not just what happened but how it felt. She listened closely, smiling whenever I admitted I enjoyed certain parts. I didn't want to admit that out loud, but there it was. At home, I changed into sweatpants and wiped off my makeup. Seeing my original face felt strange, like I'd stepped into an older version of myself. I couldn't tell which felt more real anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, the memories repeated like scenes from a movie. The looks, the voices, the compliments. The boy from English. The reflection in the window. I thought I'd be relieved that the first day was over, but instead I felt something unexpected: curiosity. I wondered who I'd become by the end of the week, whether I'd still recognize the person under the makeup, or if I'd discover something I'd never known about myself. I tried to dismiss the thoughts, but they clung to me, quiet and persistent. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything began to change for real. The second morning came faster than I wanted. I woke before my alarm, staring at the ceiling like my thoughts had been running all night without me. The room felt unfamiliar, as if yesterday's experience had rearranged the air itself. I sat up slowly, unsure whether the first day had really gone that smoothly or if my mind had softened the edges. But then I remembered the faces, the voices, the way people treated me, Arya, and I realized it wasn't a dream. Maya knocked lightly before entering, carrying another set of clothes neatly folded in her arms, a pleated skirt, stockings, and a soft knit top. The sight made my pulse skip. Yesterday had been simple leggings and a sweater. This felt bolder. She grinned when she saw my expression, saying I had nothing to worry about. But I had plenty to worry about. Wearing a skirt felt like stepping deeper into unfamiliar territory, and yet I didn't argue. As she applied makeup, I found myself relaxing more easily than the day before. The brushes and palettes no longer felt like foreign instruments. Somehow, the routine felt weirdly comforting. I watched my reflection shift again, features softening, shape changing, not into someone new, but someone I'd begun to recognize: Arya. Walking into school that day felt different. I didn't cling to the walls or keep my head down. Instead, I lifted my chin, stepped lightly, and moved with more confidence than I thought I could handle. Maybe it was the way people looked at me, not with confusion, but with casual acknowledgement, like I'd always been there. At my locker, a few girls approached me, one from science class, two from gym. They invited me to join them before first period. The invitation alone stunned me. Nobody ever asked me to hang out before school. I followed them, trying not to seem too eager. They talked about simple things: weekend plans, teachers they liked, movies they'd watched, and I found myself joining in naturally. It felt surprisingly easy, like I'd slipped into a rhythm that had been waiting for me. First period passed in a blur. The teacher asked a question, and before I knew it, I raised my hand. When I answered, the room fell quiet. It wasn't because I sounded strange, more because my voice, though slightly softer than usual, carried confidence. The teacher nodded, impressed. I couldn't remember the last time someone looked at me like that during class. Between periods, Tyler showed up beside me, falling into step without warning. He glanced at my outfit, eyebrows raised. I expected a joke, but he just said, "You're really putting in the effort." I wasn't sure if it was praise or surprise, but it felt sincere. We walked together, quietly comfortable. Something about the way he looked at me made my thoughts twist in ways I didn't want to examine too closely. Then lunchtime came, and with it the first real shock. As I approached the cafeteria, I heard someone calling Arya with urgency. I turned and saw the same boy from English class, nervous again, hands stuffed into his pockets. He apologized for rushing off yesterday and asked if I wanted to sit with him today. My brain stalled. I wasn't used to people seeking me out like this. Before I could answer, I felt someone step between us, Tyler. His expression tightened, though he kept his tone neutral. He said I already had plans and guided me toward our usual table. The boy nodded stiffly and backed away. I felt a pang of guilt, though I didn't know why. As we sat, Tyler avoided my eyes. I asked if he was okay, but he brushed it off, saying he just didn't trust that guy. Then, more quietly, he said something that caught me off guard. "You're different this week." I didn't know how to respond. He wasn't accusing me, just observing. I asked what he meant, and he shrugged. "You seem more open, like you're actually enjoying this." I denied it immediately, but the words felt weak as they left my mouth. Was I enjoying it? The answer scared me more than I wanted to admit. The day continued with small moments that added up. Someone complimented my handwriting, another asked where I got my shoes, a teacher told me I seemed more focused lately. Every interaction chipped away at the discomfort I'd carried on day one. I started to forget I was supposed to feel like an outsider. After school, Maya picked me up again. On the ride home, she asked if anything interesting happened, and I hesitated. I wasn't sure how to explain the strange tension around the English class boy or why Tyler acted differently. She listened quietly as I stumbled through the story, nodding thoughtfully. Then she asked a question I wasn't ready for. "How did you feel about it?" I didn't know how to answer, so I said the only thing that made sense. I felt confused. She didn't push further. She just told me confusion was normal, especially when life shifts fast. Then she added something that stuck. "Sometimes we learn who we are when we step outside what we think we know." That evening, at home, I stood in front of the mirror again. I washed away the makeup, changed into my usual clothes, but something felt off. Like I'd stepped out of a skin that somehow fit better than the one beneath. I stared at my reflection, my original self, and felt an unexpected distance. Was this really me? Or was I hiding behind the version I'd always assumed I had to be? That thought bothered me more than anything else. I tried to brush it aside, but it lingered, heavy and persistent. I lay in bed feeling the weight of the week pressing in on me. Only 2 days, and I was already unsure where the lines were, between who I was pretending to be, and who I could become. Sleep came slowly, haunting me with a question I couldn't shake. What if this wasn't just a challenge? What if this was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared to understand? By Wednesday morning, the routine felt strangely familiar. Wake up, shower, wait for Maya to arrive with carefully chosen outfits. She greeted me with her usual bright smile, though I sensed a hint of curiosity behind it, like she was watching for something she couldn't quite name. This time, the outfit waiting on my chair was casual but thoughtfully put together. Slim dark jeans, a soft pastel blouse, and a light jacket. Nothing extravagant, yet somehow it looked intentional, maybe even stylish. As I got dressed, I studied myself in the mirror. Every day, I felt less shock looking at Arya and more recognition. I wasn't sure if that was comforting or frightening. There was a quiet familiarity in the shape of my reflection, in the way the clothes seemed to fall into place without argument. I tried not to think too hard about it, but the thought lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Maya applied makeup again, but she went lighter this time, giving me a soft, natural look. She explained that appearance wasn't about hiding, it was about being seen the way you wanted. I didn't know how I wanted to be seen, but something about her words warmed me. At school, I felt a flutter of nerves that settled quickly when I realized no one looked twice at me. They just accepted me. People waved, said good morning, smiled casually. I blended in more than I ever had before. It should have felt like relief, but instead, I felt a strange ache deep inside, like familiarity was just beginning to wrap around me in a way I didn't understand. Mid-morning, in the hallway between classes, the English class boy, Ethan, approached again. He looked nervous but determined. He apologized for catching me off guard at lunch the day before and asked if we could talk after school instead. His sincerity made me pause. I didn't know how to respond without breaking the illusion or hurting him, but I didn't want to be unkind. I told him we could talk, but only briefly because I had plans. He smiled, relieved, and thanked me before heading off. I stood there for a moment, feeling the world shift around me in ways I couldn't quite name. Later in the day, during group work in science class, something changed. For the first time, I spoke up naturally, ideas flowing, thoughts forming without hesitation. My group listened closely, nodding, even complimenting my reasoning. I felt capable, like my voice held more weight than before. Maybe it wasn't the voice itself that changed, but the courage behind it. Between classes, Tyler found me again. He seemed unsettled, like thoughts were swirling behind his eyes. He asked about Ethan, his tone casual, but his jaw clenched just slightly. I told him we were just talking after school, nothing more. He didn't say much in response, but the air between us felt charged, tense in ways I didn't understand. Lunchtime brought another surprise. The girls from earlier in the week saved a seat for me, waving me over eagerly. We shared stories and whispered complaints about assignments. I found myself laughing freely, genuine laughter that rose without force. I relaxed into the rhythm of their conversations, enjoying the warmth of their presence. At one point, they offered to do my nails the next day. I automatically said yes before thinking. Their excitement made it feel like some unofficial initiation, and I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. After school, I met Ethan near the courtyard. The air was cool and the trees rustled softly above us. He seemed shy but determined. He asked simple questions: where I lived, what music I liked, whether I enjoyed English class. I answered carefully. Nothing about his tone felt mocking or insincere. He talked about how he liked writing stories, and his face lit up when he explained his ideas. I listened, really listened, and found myself enjoying the conversation. At one point, he paused, meeting my eyes, and said he'd been too nervous to talk to me earlier in the year. My breath caught. He didn't know I wasn't who he thought I was, and I didn't know how to tell him without breaking something fragile. I gently shifted the conversation towards schoolwork, hoping he didn't notice the hesitation in my voice. When we parted, he thanked me again and said he hoped we could talk more. I nodded, though part of me felt guilty. I didn't know if I was leading him on or just trying to be kind. The line felt blurry and sharp all at once. As I walked toward the parking lot, I saw Tyler leaning against Maya's car. His expression was tight, unreadable. He asked how the conversation went, tone cool. I told him it was fine, that we just talked about school. He nodded, but his jaw worked as if he was holding back words he couldn't shape. The ride home was quiet. Maya listened to me recount the day, her eyes bright with pride and curiosity. She told me I seemed happier, not pretending, but settling into something true. Her words hit harder than I expected. I didn't know if I was settling or drifting, but something inside me was shifting, layer by layer. That evening, when I washed off my makeup and changed into my old clothes, I felt that same odd distance again. The sense that I was stepping backward into a version of myself that didn't quite fit anymore. It unsettled me, but there was no ignoring it. I lay in bed thinking about Ethan's sincerity, the way Tyler's expression changed, the warmth of the girls at lunch, the unexpected confidence I felt speaking out in class. Each piece weighed on me, tugging at something deep within, something I didn't have a name for. Before sleep came, a quiet truth whispered at the edge of my mind. I was changing. Not just outwardly, but inwardly, shifting into someone I didn't recognize but somehow understood. And I didn't know if I wanted it to stop. Thursday morning arrived with a quiet heaviness, like the air itself knew something inside me had shifted. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time before getting ready, trying to steady my thoughts. The week was halfway over, yet it felt like I'd lived an entire month inside those few days. I wasn't sure who I was waking up as anymore, the person I'd always been, or the person I was slowly becoming. Maya came in carrying a small box and a gentle smile. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me, sensing the weight in the room. After a moment, she handed me the box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet, delicate but sturdy. She said it was hers from when she was younger, and she wanted me to wear it for the rest of the week. It wasn't dramatic or fancy, just meaningful. I slipped it on, feeling its coolness against my skin, oddly grounding. Then came the clothes, a soft teal sweater, wide-leg pants, and flats. Practical, comfortable. I was grateful for that. As she worked on my makeup, I realized I wasn't nervous about the process anymore, only about what came after. About how people would look at me, what they'd say, and how those words would settle into me. At school, the halls felt different, not louder or busier, but more focused. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. People greeted me by name, Arya, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I found myself responding without hesitation. For a fleeting moment, I forgot this was temporary. Before first period, one of the girls from lunch waved me over. excited. She pulled a small nail kit from her bag and said we could use part of our study period to paint my nails. I hesitated, but only briefly. Something inside me whispered yes. I agreed, and she smiled like I'd just given her the best news of the week. In the classroom, we settled near the back, quietly chatting as she worked. She painted my nails a soft rose color, nothing flashy, just subtle and clean. I watched her hands as she worked, steady and confident, and wondered if she saw through the layers I was wearing. But she didn't ask personal questions. She just told me stories about her cousins, her dog, and how she'd always admired people who tried new things without fear. I didn't know if I fit that description, but hearing her say it made me sit a little straighter. When the bell rang, I felt strangely proud. My hands looked different, gentler, more intentional. I thanked her and she grinned, saying it suited me. The day moved steadily, but the most unexpected moment came during lunch. Tyler sat down across from me, his expression serious. After a long silence, he said he wanted to talk, really talk. He asked how I was doing, not just in the challenge, but in general. His voice was quieter than usual, like the words were fragile. I didn't know how to answer, so I told him the truth, that things felt confusing, that I didn't know how to make sense of everything changing around me. He nodded, looking down at the table. Then he admitted something I didn't expect. He said he felt responsible for this whole situation, and he hadn't realized how seriously it would affect me. He thought it would be a joke, a day or two of chaos, and then we'd laugh about it. But now, seeing how well I'd adapted, how people responded to me, made him question whether the challenge was harmless after all. I didn't know what to say. I told him it wasn't his fault, that I chose to take the bet. And it was true. But hearing him worry about me made something twist inside my chest. I assured him I was okay, even though I wasn't entirely sure of that myself. He studied me for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said I seemed happier this way. Not just different, happier. His honesty shook me. I didn't know how to respond, so I just looked away, staring at the bracelet on my wrist. After school, I walked with Maya to the car. But before we got in, Ethan appeared again, waving shyly. He asked if I'd like to walk home instead of riding. I froze, caught between curiosity and caution. Before I could answer, Maya gently pushed me forward, whispering that she trusted me to make my own choice. I took a breath and agreed. We walked together along the quiet sidewalks, talking about small things, his favorite books, the way autumn leaves always reminded him of new beginnings. I listened, feeling the simplicity of the moment settle around us like a blanket. At one point, he paused, then asked if I'd be interested in joining his creative writing group after school sometime. He said I had a thoughtful way of speaking, like I was always paying attention to the small details. The compliment caught me off guard. I'd never been described that way before. When we reached my street, he thanked me for walking with him. He seemed like he wanted to say more, but didn't. I watched him leave, feeling the quiet between us linger even as he disappeared from view. Inside the house, Maya asked how it went. I told her everything, how gentle he seemed, how safe the walk felt, how the conversation flowed easily. She listened, nodding slowly, her expression soft. Then she asked a single question. Did you feel like yourself? I didn't know how to answer. The truth was complicated. I felt like someone I recognized, someone who had always been there beneath the surface, waiting for the chance to speak. But I also felt like I was drifting further away from the person I'd always been expected to be. That night, staring at my reflection with freshly painted nails and a silver bracelet, I tried to picture who I'd be when the week ended. Would I go back to everything I was before? Could I? Or would part of this, part of Arya, stay with me forever? Those questions echoed as I lay in bed, sleep slow to arrive. The days ahead felt uncertain, like I was walking a thin line between two lives without knowing which side I would eventually step toward. And as I drifted into uneasy dreams, I realized something quietly terrifying. I wasn't sure I wanted this to end. Friday arrived with a strange mix of energy and heaviness, like the world was holding its breath. I woke up before the alarm again, staring at my ceiling as the early light crept through my curtains. It was almost the end of the week. A week that was supposed to be a joke, a dare, a temporary performance. But instead, it had become something deeper, something that quietly dug its way under my skin and made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. The bracelet Maya had given me clinked softly when I moved. I'd forgotten to take it off. Maybe I didn't want to. Maya walked in without knocking, holding a soft sweater dress, simple gray paired with black tights and boots. It looked clean, warm, effortless. When she held it out, she watched my face carefully, like she was waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't say anything at first. I just touched the fabric, feeling how comfortable it seemed, how fitting it felt even before I put it on. Her silence lingered before she finally spoke. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said gently. "How do you feel?" It took me a long time to answer. Eventually, I whispered the truth. Different. She smiled, not in surprise, but in understanding. Then she helped with my makeup, keeping it soft and calm. I didn't have to be anyone specific today, just present. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw something new. Not just Arya, not just the person I used to be, something in between, suspended in possibility. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of that. At school, the hallways buzzed with their usual morning energy, but people seemed to notice me more. Not because I looked unusual, but because I seemed sure. I walked differently. Less hesitant. More grounded. Maybe I had been changing without meaning to. Or maybe the change was simply revealing who I'd always been underneath. In first period, the teacher asked us to partner up for an in-class assignment. Before I could move, Tyler slid into the seat beside me. He didn't say much, but his presence was steady. We worked quietly, trading notes without the usual teasing or jokes. At one point, I caught him looking at my bracelet. He asked if it was new, and when I explained it was from Maya, he nodded thoughtfully, like the answer meant more than I realized. When the bell rang, he asked if I wanted to walk with him. We stepped into the hallway, the noise of students washing over us. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke, and I wondered if he was building up to something. Then, finally, he stopped, turning to face me near the stairwell. He said something simple, just 5 words, but they slid beneath my ribs with startling clarity. "I don't want to lose you." My breath hitched. I didn't know what he meant. Lose me how? As a friend? As someone he recognized? Did he mean Arya or the version of me he had known before? I asked what he was talking about, but he didn't answer directly. He just shook his head slightly, frustrated with himself, then walked with me to my next class before slipping away. I spent the rest of the morning in a haze, replaying his words. I didn't know what he meant, and I didn't know how to feel. I only knew that something was changing, not just in me, but around me. During lunch, the girls waved me over again. Their energy was warm, welcoming. I found myself laughing, sharing stories, letting the conversation carry me. At one point, one of them commented that I seemed more relaxed today. I wasn't sure if that was true, but hearing it made me smile. Then came the moment that blindsided me. One of the girls leaned in and said she assumed I'd been out of town during the fall pep rally last month. When I asked why, she shrugged and said she would have remembered me if I'd been there. I froze. She didn't recognize me at all, not even a hint. The realization hit like a quiet wave. For days, people had accepted me without question. But now I understood that it wasn't just acceptance, it was complete separation from who I'd been. I wasn't blending into my old life. I was building a new one. After school, Ethan found me again. He was holding a small notebook, the kind writers carry everywhere. He told me he'd written a piece for the creative writing group and wanted to share it with me. I agreed, curious. We found a quiet corner near the entrance, where sunlight filtered through dusty glass. He opened the notebook and read aloud. His story was gentle and thoughtful, about a person caught between 2 worlds, not sure where they belonged, afraid to choose, afraid not to. As he read, I felt a strange pressure behind my eyes, like his words had peeled back a layer of me I'd tried to keep hidden. When he finished, he asked what I thought. I told him it was beautiful, honest, and that I understood it more than I wanted to admit. He smiled softly, saying he'd written it without knowing why, only that it felt important. I didn't respond because I wasn't sure what to say. When I got home, the house was quiet. Maya had gone out with friends, leaving me alone. I took off my boots and moved to my room, sitting at my desk without turning on the light. The faint evening glow cast long shadows across the floor. I stared at my hands, the soft rose-colored nails, the silver bracelet, and felt a hollow tug in my chest. How had something that started as a joke turned into this? Into an internal earthquake that shifted everything inside me. I breathed slowly, trying to sort the thoughts tumbling through my head. I thought about the beginning, how terrified I'd been, how sure I was that I'd hate all of this. But now, 5 days later, the fear wasn't about presenting as Arya. It was about what would happen when I didn't. The question I'd avoided all week finally rose to the surface. Quiet, patient, impossible to ignore. Who was I becoming? I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling again. Time passed in a slow, heavy blur until sleep finally crept in. I didn't dream of running away from the week anymore. I dreamed of choices, branches spreading in every direction, paths I could take, each one leading somewhere different. I woke with my heart pounding, unsure whether the fear inside me was something to escape or something to listen to. Saturday felt colder than the rest of the week, even though the sun was out. I sat up slowly, realizing there were only 2 days left, including today, before the week was over. It should have brought relief. Instead, the thought tightened quietly in my chest. When I stepped into the hallway, Maya was already waiting. She held no clothes, no makeup, no teasing smile, just a cup of warm tea. She handed it to me without a word. For a moment, we just stood there in silence, the steam drifting between us. Finally, she spoke. "You get to choose today," she said. "No rules, wear what you want, be who you want." Her voice was calm, without pressure or expectation. I carried the tea back to my room, closing the door behind me. The quiet pressed in. I walked to my closet and slid the door open. 2 worlds stared back, familiar jeans and shirts on one side, and the softer, more intentional outfits Maya had helped me piece together on the other. The choice felt impossibly heavy for something so simple. After a long minute, I reached for a pair of soft jeans, a white t-shirt, and a light sweater, the kind of clothes that could belong to anyone. Neutral, comfortable. Mine. I studied myself in the mirror. There was no makeup, but the bracelet remained on my wrist. My face was not Arya's, not entirely, but not entirely the old me either. Something subtle lingered, a softness behind the eyes, a gentleness in posture that hadn't existed before. I stepped outside, unsure where my feet were taking me, until I looked up and realized I was walking toward the park. The familiar path curved beneath the trees, leaves fluttering in the morning breeze. I sat on a worn bench, breathing slowly, letting the cold settle into me. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Tyler eased down beside me, hands shoved in his pockets. He stared straight ahead, like he'd practiced this moment but still wasn't ready. "Your sister told me you'd be here," he said quietly. I nodded, the silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just honest. He finally spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about this week, about you." His voice trembled, not with fear but sincerity. He said he'd never considered how much a single change could reveal about a person, not just to others but to themselves. That he'd thought this would be funny, simple, a win or lose kind of bet. But instead, it felt like he'd opened a door without understanding what lay behind it. I listened, unsure what to say. Then he turned toward me. "That first day, I didn't recognize you, but then I did. Not because of how you looked, but because of how you spoke, how you carried yourself. You were still you, but freer. And I liked seeing that." His voice steadied. "I meant what I said. I don't want to lose you, not the old you, not this you, just you." A knot formed in my throat. I didn't know how to respond, because I didn't fully know who you was anymore. We sat together for a long time, before I finally admitted the truth. "I don't know who I am right now." He didn't try to fix it. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He just nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to decide today." Something eased in me. We walked home slowly, side by side, not as a joke or a dare, but simply as friends. Quiet, steady understanding. Later that afternoon, Ethan texted, asking if I wanted to join his writing group. I stared at the message for a long time. I wanted to say yes, to follow the thread of the person I'd been becoming. But I knew I wasn't ready, not yet. I replied honestly. Not right now, but maybe soon. His response came quickly. I'll save you a seat. The words made me smile. That evening, I sat with Maya in the living room, our legs curled beneath us on the couch. She asked how my day went, and I told her everything. About the park, about Tyler, about the quiet that didn't feel empty. She listened, then rested her head against my shoulder. You're allowed to be more than one thing, she said. You don't have to choose just because the week ends. Her words settled inside me like warm light. Sunday arrived quietly, without pressure. I woke up, got dressed in simple clothes, and looked at my reflection one last time. Not to judge or compare, just to see. The face staring back wasn't confused. Not exactly. It was changing, growing into itself. The week hadn't turned me into someone else. It had revealed someone I hadn't made space for before. When the clock struck midnight, the challenge officially ended. No confetti, no announcement, just a quiet shift in the air. But ending the bet didn't undo anything. On Monday, I walked into school wearing clothes that felt right, not old, not new, just mine. Some people still called me Arya, others used my old name. I didn't correct either. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't performing. I was simply existing in the space between, figuring out where I felt most like myself. Tyler met me by the lockers. He didn't comment on my clothes or my name. He just smiled and walked beside me. Ethan waved from across the hall. The girls from lunch asked if I still wanted to hang out. Life didn't snap back to normal. It shifted forward, quiet, steady, hopeful. I didn't have every answer. Maybe I wouldn't for a long time. But I'd learned something more important than the outcome of a bet. Identity isn't a costume. It's not something you put on for a week and then take off. It's something you grow into, piece by piece, moment by moment, until one day you look in the mirror and see someone true staring back. The week had ended, but my story hadn't. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. It felt like a beginning.